Welcome to Hacking Founders.
where we are unlocking the secrets of leadership and innovation so you can learn from others' experiences.
I'm Brother Elana, Head of Design and Innovation at Rocketband.
I'm Tamara Medina, leadership and business expert from Shapowaloa Solutions.
Stay with us. At the end of the podcast, we have our special collaborator, the AI Roulette, who will hack our guests with some challenging questions.
Today we are joined by a true pioneer of the tech industry who has mastered the art of transforming innovative ideas into successful businesses. With 7 startups, multiple fundraisers, and a global network spanning 138 countries under their belt, our guest has been at the forefront of everything from artificial intelligence to digital social publishing. We are very excited to dive into his insights on leadership and innovation, and most importantly, building businesses that make a real difference.
Thank you, Tamara and Rodo, for inviting me onto the recording today. So my background is very much one of an entrepreneur who has been around for more years than I'd like to share, actually. The term entrepreneur wasn't really used at the time I started out in business, but I found myself back in the 1970s, after working for the BBC as an engineer, I found myself starting the first business in a chain of businesses, which I've started over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Most of those businesses have been in technology, and I guess really, rather than having a conventional career, I meandered from one startup to another startup, doing different roles, but generally having some sort of technological focus. So in product design, in electronics, in project management. And then I guess for all entrepreneurs, you need to have multiple skills and experience. So again, I sort of meandered into sales and marketing and then into general management. In between starting new businesses, I also was employed by a couple of corporates. I ran 2 ventures for BT, the listed telecoms company. Like a lot of corporates these days, they tend to have their own CVC or development capabilities for early stage businesses that are cultivated from within the organization. And I was fortunate enough to be involved with 2 of those. They're like really great funded startups from within BT. So it's not like having to go and raise external money. The money comes from pitching to the financiers in BT. So a couple of other organizations, a couple of small businesses, a couple of mid-market businesses. I did some work for a not-for-profit, developing some technology solutions. I got involved with an outsourced software development business in Istanbul, and that business eventually built one of the products which we then span out. And Tamara mentioned the publishing platform. That was the main product that we spun out from that business. And more recently, I have been involved with a business that supports companies expanding internationally, mainly tech and digital, although we do work with life science companies. And we built a network and an ecosystem of over 600 in-country practitioners, trade bodies, membership organizations, and economic development organizations that can help a UK or European company expand globally, providing all of the relevant advice and guidance and boots on the ground to make sure your chances of success are greater. And we've helped now over 5,000 companies through that process in the last 10 years. And that's given another perspective on life and the universe, let's say.
That's amazing, Ian. What a CV. Obviously, you've been relying a lot on tech, and I'm very curious. What is started? What is your I mean, you said that you started as an engineer. So what is this interest coming from to
Oh, that
technology and
yeah. So I've always been interested in technology. When I was at school, I was lucky enough. The school I was at introduced an electronics qualification. First time that this was done, and so I was as a child, I had an electronics kit where I was learning what transistors were and the transistor that turned a light bulb on and off, and simple things like that that inspired me. When I joined the BBC, I had the choice of going to university or the BBC, and I chose the BBC because of the practical aspects of being in situ and learning with experience, and of course, earning a salary as well was quite attractive. Um, but I've always been interested in technology. I think I've read a lot of thousands of sci-fi books. They get my brain thinking about the future, but also how can we do some of those things early on. And then, my first startup business was building a high-speed audio cassette copying system for typically for newspapers for the blind, not for bootleg cassettes. Many people won't be familiar with audio cassettes, but they were the go-to media at that time. And you would have a C60 cassette, which, as the name suggests, was 60 minutes worth of playtime. And it was double-sided, so you could get a C60 with 120 when you flipped the thing over and played it the other way. And we created a high-speed cassette copier that could copy that at 16 times normal speed, maintaining the quality. But you could also, because it was modular, you could have 10 or 20 of these machines all synced together from one master making 20 copies at a time, 16 times speed. And it was truly phenomenal. I have to say, when we set out, we had an ambition to do this. And we're going back now, the technology then was, if I can be a little bit technical, was mains powered synchronous motors that were either on or off. You couldn't control them very easily, and you certainly couldn't do the sorts of control that we needed to run a system where you had multiple modules that were synchronized together. You just couldn't do that. So we had to go to a DC controlled system. And then we found that running at 16 times speed, and there was always with cassettes a phenomenon known as wow and flutter, which was where the little rubber wheel that was keeping the speed constant would get a little bit of dirt, and that little bit of dirt manifested itself in a little bit of jitter, and hence the term wow and flutter. And at 16 times speed, that's amplified enormously. And so we set out with what was a simple brief to go at 16 times speed, and very quickly realized that there was a big challenge that we hadn't thought about. How do you do that at 16 times speed? We ended up working with a motor designer in South Wales who designed a new motor, and we had to learn what the new techniques were in motors. We had to learn about rare earth magnets and how you could use those to have strong fields and keep the torque necessary to drive the cassette. So there I am, knowing nothing about motors. In truth, knowing very little about motor control systems. I had to hire an electronic specialist who designed with me a control system. And so to your question, Rodo, what was happening here is my interest was being, to some extent, forced on me because of the circumstances we'd put ourselves in. But at the same time, every one of these technical challenges was a fantastic challenge that really got me out of bed. And when I say got me out of bed, I tell you, I was often in the office at 6 o'clock in the morning and didn't leave till 2 or 3 o'clock the next day. It was that intensive, but it was hugely enjoyable. And I've just described one of the challenges, which was the electrical and mechanical side of things. But you then have a lot of noise that's induced by those types of motors that you have to then eradicate because that leaks onto the recording. And then because you are running at 16 times speed, the bandwidth, the electronics bandwidth isn't like normal audio, a 20 kilohertz signal. It's 160 kilohertz, 300 kilohertz signal. So all of those things work together. And we built this product bit by bit, challenge by challenge, and eventually we got a working system. And we had a test cassette which we used, and I can remember having the audio system blasting out 100 watts when we replayed the first attempt at a fully developed solution. And we listened to this and thought, wow, this is unbelievable. And that moment was I'll never forget. It was an amazing achievement, and we went on to sell lots and lots of those products. It was in huge demand. But you know what? We also failed as a business because we had no experience of running a business. We did really well in terms of developing the product, the technology, and I think maybe some listeners will realize that they've had similar stories.
We obviously we second on that one. We are tech company. We helping other companies to launch. But one of the fundamental lesson that we learn is like you're running a business first. Tech is great. So and creating a new product or service is great. And if you achieve it, but then you need to market it and sell it.
Absolutely.
So it's part of the journey. So second on following a bit, on that experience that is amazing. Obviously now all the audio and tech around this changed dramatically. Everything is digital now. So for any entrepreneur or any founder, how critical is being in touch with the latest tech and everything from your point of view?
That's a really, really very interesting question. I have mixed views about that, actually. In business, you don't have to always innovate to be successful. You can do things in a simple way. You can do it faster, cheaper, better service. There are some fundamental things that you may wish to do as a business which don't require that extra layer of complexity that comes with innovation and technology. And inevitably, I think you need deep pockets if you're going to go down a development route. And if you have, on the other hand, an ability to compete on one of those other metrics that isn't technological, then sometimes it might still be costly, but sometimes that can be an easier route. But I think if you are going down the technology path, if you're driven by that, I think it's, especially today, you have to be really in the know. If you think about a couple of years ago when ChatGPT first came out, it was so amazing. Everyone just sort of looked at it and thought, wow, this is just fantastic. How we've been waiting for this for years. And there was a sort of pause, probably only for 2 or 3 months. I watched this, I was part of it, thinking, how can I exploit this? And you know what? Within about 3 months, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. Lots of them were people testing rather than fully developed solutions. Lots of it were like marketplaces that were coming into being, where there were tools being offered, hosting being offered, and you could develop things and then share those things in the hope that you've got a community building all of this. But back to your question, what that meant is that let's say in January of that year, GPT came out. 3 months later, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of people already competing. And then it just carried on exploding and exploding. And now we have, I think I read recently that Ernst & Young in America have just hired 50,000 AI consultants, or planning to hire 50,000 AI consultants over a period of time. And if you look at companies like Palantir, who run a number of very, very successful service contracts, working with big data. They do a lot of work in defense. They've just got a contract with the NHS in the UK to look at their data. When you look at what they're doing and how they're expanding, the tools that they've created and use on one application lead to insights into all sorts of other applications. And it's all so explosive in what you can do. The challenge, I'm sure, for companies like that, and for us guys thinking about a new product or developing a new product, is where is the market moving in the time that we've even thought about it? How many people are actually out there doing what we're about to do? And therefore, that idea of a moat, that idea of some differentiation that gets you to market quicker, faster, better, whatever that is, you absolutely need to do that. And I think importantly, you have to be really smart today. You can't just develop a product and get a playbook and go to market. You've got to put a layer on top of that where you have to be quicker, smarter, more intelligent about everything you do. You've got to use your partnerships, you've got to use your networks, you've got to leverage everything that's out there. And probably, even when you've done that, there's no guarantee because you still
Yeah.
need to have the skills to run a business. So it's a challenge, but I think the upside to that challenge is tremendous. And we've got
Mm.
so many new technologies driven largely by AI, even in the biotech world, in the pharma
Yeah.
world, driven by AI, that are going to revolutionize our lives.
Now, yeah, from your perspective now, seeing all these changes and how much technology is moving, and especially the speed. From your perspective, what do you think are the key for current leaders, and maybe the differences between the key characteristics of great leaders in the past, and what is the key where leadership is moving from your experience and your perspective?
Another great question, really insightful question. That I think that leaders today, and let's just talk initially about management rather than leaders, because there is a distinction.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I was thinking about this at the weekend. Um, we have a new leader of the country in the UK. Yeah.
Mm.
And in America, there's going to be a new leader in America in January. And I look at those two people, Starmer and Trump, and I see them completely polarized in terms of leadership. I don't believe in most of the things that Trump stands for, but if you look at him as a leader, he has a huge number of traits. He actually has some very bad traits as well, but he has a huge number of positive traits as a leader, getting out there, being visionary, which sadly I don't see that in the UK happening. And no, that's a view. So there are managers, and I think the UK has a manager running it, but I think the US will have a visionary leader running it. So I think today, because of technology and the importance of technology, and it's almost like, why should we have to have a conversation about technology being an intrinsic part of every business? And yet we still have to have consultants that go out and convince corporates to do digital transformation. You know, our governments have been saying for years that we need to digitally transform things, but what's the barrier? Why hasn't it already happened? We've got thousands and thousands of tech companies able to do that. And I think generationally, I think we have a lot of managers in their middle years and later years that haven't been grown up with the technology. And therefore they see it as a bit of a risk, a bit of a challenge for them, makes them a little bit nervous, a little bit fearful. And I think a good leader can come in and knock down some of those barriers and work with change management practice to ensure that those people that are vulnerable in that way have the awareness and the education and the support to be part of that transition rather than be compartmentalized and left to one side. So I think that's it. And I think the managers and importantly the leaders have to have baked into their whole soul, really. It's like, you know, your soul now has to have a digital element to it. We should trademark that, actually. Your soul needs to have that. And everything you think and do has to relate at some point back to that. And so, for example, now with, let's say a couple of years ago, it was digital transformation. Now it's AI and how it can make the company more productive. But, you know, the technologies available aren't just about productivity. They take us to places that haven't been possible before. And as a leader, you need to understand what those potential places are before you can even begin to make that into a project or a program or to define it in a way that your business can access it and use it. So that's a new type of leader. And I suspect a lot of the larger businesses will be leaning on those Ernst and Young consultants and other big four consultancies to support them with that. But wow, what a difference it would make if you had those skills and you were in that business and you could do that from within that business with the knowledge you have, not only of the business, but of what can happen and take place for the future with the new technologies. So it becomes a composite role now. And I think it's like in the old days, really, I learned to run a cash flow and a balance sheet and understand the principles of accounting by rote, because I had to do it multiple times over. And those are skills that really every business leader should have, whether you go to an economics school or a finance school, or however you have that. It's exactly the same now with technology, and digital transformation is just one of those technologies.
Do you, Ian? Do you think it's a more a problem of they have a fear of the or disruption or friction? This friction is because basically the unknown, or so if there were more education in that sense, or you, as you well said, those advisors, telling them what's the benefits, running some tests, we're doing in Rocket Van, we build a lot of proof of concept prototypes to demonstrate that, accelerating, automating. Sometimes we don't need AI. AI is a big word on the industry. Is now
Sure.
it's very on hype. I believe we're reaching a plateau. Is another topic for another conversation. But it's true. It's not the one solution for everything. Sometimes you need to automation, but you need to understand very well that is beneficial. So people, they don't want to stop doing what they do, and they are fear. Oh, why if something else is doing that? So I don't know. What is your take on that?
Yeah, so I think it's important always to ensure that you stick with your core competencies as a business. So I'm suggesting here that within the management team there needs to be an awareness, but I'm not suggesting that they transform their business, which might be a retail business or a hardware business, into a digital transformation business. It's just having an awareness of the need to do those things. And I think a lot of the promise and a lot of what you read, especially with some of those Palantir type projects, which are big scale with billions of dollars of revenue, no one in their right mind is going to boil the ocean with a massive plan to use AI or new technology. You're going to do it incrementally. You're going to test the waters. You're going to make sure it's right for your business, that it's right for your culture. All those things are as important as the technology itself. And to do that, you need to have, I think, probably a playbook, a structured approach to how you test the waters, how you would develop a test into more of a rollout, a pilot rollout. You do your POC, your pilot, and. So I think implementation is another part of this. And implementation, I touched on change management. I think one of the biggest problems, even in our NHS in the UK, probably true of most traditional equivalent NHS systems. There are so many people involved in that who have been going to work doing what they do every day for many years, doing exactly the same thing. How are they going to get up in the morning and feel about doing things completely differently? You have to have them on side. It's the biggest issue, I think, is the momentum of the workforce when you've got a large workforce, of how you bring them on board, how they're part of the decision-making process, part of the implementation. And to do all of that, you really need another layer in the business to be supporting them to make it successful. But when you do that, I've seen change management practitioners who understand those needs absolutely move the lever in terms of the success that you're going to get from any new implementation. So I think there's a combination of things there.
I would like to ask you a little bit about your experience regarding companies expanding internationally, because I know the last few years you've been working very closely. And I think it would be, if you can give like a few pointers of any company expanding internationally, if you could give them some sort of advice or things that they need to really think, or common challenges that you've seen across the years that you could share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And in some ways, this is another dimension to the same challenges that we've just been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So the classic journey for a company going international, let's use the example of a UK company going into America. So that company in the UK has developed their product, they've got some market traction, maybe in passing they've got a little bit of traction from the USA, and they're starting to think, that looks interesting. We've got a bit of a trend in the US, maybe we should put some more effort into that. And off they go, developing a little bit of more marketing to reach some consumers in the US, and that starts to work, and everything's going fine. But this is all very tactical. And if you step back and take a strategic view of this, there are a huge number of barriers and challenges, and by the way, compliance issues that will get you into trouble if you're not very careful. And the smart businesses, I absolutely agree that you should chase after those tactical wins because it gives you some great knowledge and data points and experience. But stand back, take the strategic view. So the key thing here is the US, whilst English speaking, is very different culture, different ways of buying, different ways of selling. And when it comes to compliance, we've got VAT with half a dozen rates. In the US, you've got sales tax with something like 35,000 combinations of rates, be it in states or federal. You've got very different compliance requirements around tax and legal. It's very litigious over there, so you have to make sure that all of your agreements are localized so they stand up at the test in US law. Even when it comes to trademarks, it's hugely important in the US. And you could easily find, as I know one company did that we supported, that someone in the US had managed to mark their, really basically do an application for their trademark. And rather than fight that, the UK company decided to change their name. Because yes, they could have tried to claim some prior art, but in the US, there's a fixed, relatively known cost to go and pursue someone. And if that other person has insurance, that could rack up. And the guy made a great decision, a very smart CEO. He said, I need to spend my time building the business, not protecting it. So he moved on from there. So look, so those are some of the snapshots there of what you need to do. So developing your go-to-market strategy. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that you can take your successful model in the UK, pick it up, move it over to the US, and off you go. I guarantee that there will be a number, if not a huge number, of subtle and sometimes not so subtle differences, which will mean that you'll get it wrong, it will cost you more, it will take you longer, and the chances of your success will go through the floor. It really is worth investing time and money to understand those things. And it's a bit like growing your business, isn't it, in the UK? Like you start by understanding your competitors, you meet your competitors, you learn from them. Wow, you're going to the US, you've got to do exactly the same. It's no different. But actually, when you get there, you'll find there are nuances around that, but you still have to go up that new learning curve. Of course, use all of your knowledge from your domestic market to make that better and quicker, but you still have to do that. That's the main thing that we see time and time again. Oh, one other thing, and that is underestimating the cost. It's interesting, actually. We ran an event recently at which we did a poll of how much people in this event were budgeting for their US expansion. And the ranges were from up to 100,000 to over $1 million. And the majority of people were under the million, but something like 15-20% were $1 million plus. And we know from experience that really you do need $1 million plus. So, you know, well done to those organizations that realize that. But the issue in America, and it's not just America, America's cost of living is huge. Hiring good people over there is very expensive. In some states, the cost of living is through the roof compared with others. And when you put all of those things together and realize that it's going to take, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months even, to develop your brand, raise awareness, get some traction, leverage that to build more awareness, and so on it goes. You've got to have deep pockets. You've got to have working capital. When you start hiring people, you've got all of the people issues which are going to consume more time and energy and other peripheral services which you've got to pay for. It's a great challenge to have, especially when you're doing the sales side of things. But as you're growing sales, you've always got the challenge of cash flow and the opportunity, and that's what drives people certainly to the US. The opportunity is so big, it's worth going for. But a word of caution, as you've heard from me there.
It's interesting, and obviously US is a big country, and working with companies, they want, obviously when we're working with companies, they're doing creating apps and SaaS products, and obviously it's like automatically like, yeah, it's going to be available everywhere. It's like, yeah, well, but you need to convince those guys. So is there any trend in terms, because it's a huge country, US, as I said earlier, where they have some states that is easy to introduce for certain sectors, or how is more or less the strategy? Just very on the high end. I know it's very complex and it will take forever, but if there's any trend on that one.
So there are definitely clusters depending on the sector that you're in, and what is happening though, there is a trend that has appeared over the last 5 years, or perhaps a little longer, but where some of the lesser known clusters, the lesser known states, have realized that if they want to compete within the US, they need to offer incentives. And so it's like if you were a Midwest organization and you were used to agriculture or mining, what are you going to do to build the economy in the digital AI world? You're going to look at high growth industries and say, what we'll do is we'll start by investing in universities to train people with the right qualifications. That will then pull people into the region. Once you've got people into the region, you need to have the corporates that you're going to sell to. So you've got the product companies coming in, you've got the talent there, but you need the corporates. The corporates aren't going to come there unless there's an economy for them to exploit. So you've got to build all those things. But unless those states do that, they're lost forever. And the smart states, and I think most of the states actually have been doing this, but many of them now invest in economic development organizations whose role it is to attract foreign direct investment. And you can see where perhaps Boston is the life science place for companies to go to, or LA, let's say, is another hotspot, that now increasingly the Midwest is competing. And in fact, last week I met with 6 economic development organizations, and all 6 of those EDOs, and they're from places like Utah, Florida, as I said, Carolina, and they're not mainstream destinations necessarily, but they all now have a thriving life science and biotech, because life science is just one of those high growth and continues to be so. And the supply chain around that is also fascinating, because I think that's, Roddo, where your SaaS companies and technology suppliers can come in, because once you've got the laboratories, once you've got the corporate farmers in those clusters, once you've got the PhD students that are available for you to hire, and remember also, these are poorer states, so the cost of living is much lower. Cost of running a business is much lower. You put that into the mix, and now if you are a SaaS company, you could afford to go out there, spend 6 months to a year, have a nice holiday whilst you're there. But more importantly, you can be there and build your business and be in those ecosystems. And there's something I sense about the way that those states are doing this, where they are genuinely trying to build a community. And so they're knocking down the formalities and the barriers to doing that. And you can go to these economic development organizations and they'll walk you around and introduce you to 100 people. And those 100 people will embrace you and walk you around to another 100, so that you're getting proactive introductions. And, wow, everyone we meet, I certainly meet in the UK, is so busy surviving, and let alone going forward, that have the time. But there you are. I see that happening. So yes, finding those clusters and finding them is not easy, but I think with a little bit of market desk research, and there is a resource in the US which has something like 300 or 400 registered economic development organizations that offer foreign direct investment in incentives and benefits. And if you can find the time to explore that, you'll go and find out where those clusters are, um, and what's important to you. Being on the East Coast might be more important because of accessibility, but don't forget the West Coast also gives you access to Southeast Asia and the Asian continent as well. So, there's some pros and cons there.
If there's any young people wanting to go into entrepreneurship as a career or starting a business, what would you tell somebody young, somebody after all the experience that you have had? What would be your advice to them?
Well, firstly, I personally don't think that entrepreneurship is a career. I think it's a label. I think it's an attribute that is something that some people have that drives them. I didn't label myself an entrepreneur. Other people labeled me that. And haven't had a conventional career path. I've had what I think people call a portfolio career throughout. And I've been referred to as a serial entrepreneur. I think the most important thing is not those labels. I think it is about how you approach running the business, how you approach your vision, really having the expertise to understand what it really takes to do this. And there's so much in running a business. It's not just the technology, as we've already spoken about. Tamara, you might want to fire that question at me again, because I'm not sure I answered it.
I think you did, because I totally agree with what you're saying, in the sense of it's, I don't know, it's I think usually being of starting a business is it's something that it's a driver, although in many cases there's a lot of people that want to see it as a career, or it's been in fashion to become an entrepreneur and to have your own business. But really a true, I guess, a true, it's like a passion that you need to feel for something. No?
Yeah, and what are the drivers? It could be I want to get rich. It could be that I want to solve a challenge. I want to do something good for mankind. There's a whole raft of different drivers. I think you should also be super clear about what it is that you're trying to achieve. It will inform a number of different decisions and your strategy and how you go about things. And I think increasingly in this, the way that the younger generations are evolving, I think there needs to be a level of transparency around that, and a lot of buy-in to have your staff and your ecosystem aligned to whatever you're doing. Yeah, there's some great leaders out there doing that in the ESG space, although that's a struggle now because things are tough out there. The world is broken in a financial sense, broken in a many different ways. So it's tough times. And I think also then when you're starting your own business and you're thinking about the product, the proposition, the markets, how much money you need, how much you're going to make, whatever those drivers are as well, you need to also think about how realistic am I? Is my passion enough to see me through the other side? Or am I going to be extra things? Extra things could be some really smart advisors who've been there and done it before. Extra things could be raising more money than I've dreamt of because I'm going to run out of money multiple times and spend my whole life fundraising, like so many companies have to, which is crazy. So I think having that experience that I've acquired, and I keep thinking at my age, if I could start a business again, it would be so much easier because I'd know what to do. Whereas before I had to fail and learn and iterate. And now I feel I'm in a better place. But nonetheless, you've got to do all that to be familiar with the landscape, don't you?
So now kind of going back a little bit about, because one of the first questions that Rodo asked, one of the things that you shared with us was this passion you felt, like this wanting to get out of bed. So now, what gets you out of bed now?
Oh, still very much thinking about new things that haven't been done before.
Mm-hmm.
Just different types of challenge, leveraging technology to do things either in a new way or in a way that hasn't been conceived before. And then there's another part of me which is like a lot of people getting older, thinking about what else I can do to give back to society. So that's not about necessarily building something, but it's about sharing some of these experiences to help others. So there's that dimension as well.
That's great. So I think we're reaching the point that we need to call on stage our AI roulette. That is, we need to say that is not us. We asked, to generate, so it will generate a random question for you. So we detach of the consequences. You are free to say, whatever you like, and if not, off the record, we can pass and have another one. Okay. So I'm just gonna let's
Share
see
the
if I
screen.
can. Yeah, share the screen. What
We're
is
still
that
developing
one?
it, so
Yeah, but here
Excellent
it is.
idea.
So here it is. So anytime you want, we just kind of click and you
Go on then.
say, go on then. Let's see. So, have you ever had to choose between your ethics and your business goals? What did you decide and how you did feel?
Yes, I think
Easy one.
that's a toughie. That really is a toughie. But I think increasingly those are the sorts of things you really do have to decide about. Uh, I find the answer to that very difficult. I think some people would choose one or the other very quickly, and I think it depends on your makeup. I'd like to do both, but obviously you're not asking that question. You're asking which to decide on. In my earlier career, I know I would have chosen the business goals. I think as I've moved through life, I think ethics have become more important. And I have certainly made decisions of late which have been more related to what's fairer, what's more ethical than necessarily putting business goals first. And I think if you can do that, then you're likely to have a better support from your team and the people in your networks that you work with. There's obviously a balance here in making sure that you drive your business goals forward, but they don't have to be exclusive, mutually exclusive.
Interesting. Obviously, running a business, you're always in that constant balance, whether it's working with people, because sometimes we need to run a business, and sometimes the decision of hiring or firing people is in there, and ethics, and then also making some partnerships. So, any experience on that you could share?
I have had to fire a number of people. I once had to fire somebody that was hugely more talented than I was, who had an experience in life that was hugely better, that was earning twice as much as me. And I found that whole situation frightening. But the reality was, because that guy was a smart guy and been around the block, we ended up having a sensible conversation. But he drove that conversation rather than me. I learned a huge amount from that. I've had to discipline a huge number of people. I think there's a whole piece there in thinking about why do you have to discipline people and what causes that to happen. And a lot of the time, I think it's a lack of laying down the foundations and the framework and the rules in your business. And without that, there's obviously going to be room for confusion. And in a small business, you might think, well, there's no point in having that until I have 10 or 20 staff. And that may be true, but I think there are certain things you need to lay down. Getting your brand and what your brand stands for, what its purpose in life is, what how it builds a culture. That is definitely a worthwhile exercise to do, regardless of your size. And you can then let some of those things permeate through your decisions, and it will manifest itself in the way that you recruit people, and hopefully be better at not having to fire people having got some of those things in place.
Amazing.
Thank you very much, Ian. So before we say goodbye, is there anything else that you would like to share? One last thought.
Well, one last thought would be this. I think for what I've said about entrepreneurialism, I think it is an amazing trait to have people that have entrepreneurship in their makeup. I don't know that you can acquire that. I'd like to think that you can with enough exposure. But what I would say is, in closing here, I really take my hat off to anyone, whatever age, but especially if you're young with limited experience of life and business. I take my hat off to you for giving it a go and exploring things. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's really, really tough. And when you solve one problem, there's another 2 or 3 that come and get you. And that's going to be like that for a long time. Don't give up. Okay. Come back to some of the things we've talked about here, being smart, getting support from peers, from people that have been there and done it before, and just stick at it. And I'm absolutely sure that you'll be successful if you take on board just a little bit of that advice and work with people like Tamara and Rodo to check out what they can offer through their networks. It's incredibly important to get that peer level. What a shame. It's important to get that peer level fusion of thoughts.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. Join the conversation, follow, like, and subscribe on our different platforms.
This podcast was brought to you by Rocket Band, Shapovalovat Solutions, and Harrington Blue and Partners.